The wind howled like a dying beast, screeching down from the frozen ridges and slicing across the valley. The sky was ash-gray, the sun a dull smudge of light behind thick clouds. Snow fell in angry sheets, piling on the woman's shoulders, her arms curled tightly around the tiny bundle clutched to her chest. She was barely more than a girl, skin frostbitten blue, lips cracked, her long dark hair tangled with ice. The baby, silent now, lay pressed against her collarbone, wrapped in the last strips of fabric torn from her own clothes. She hadn't meant to come this far. The outpost was supposed to be just over the ridge, marked on a map that now felt like a cruel joke. But when the shuttle crashed, and no rescue beacon answered, she'd walked. Walked until her boots split apart and her legs gave out. Walked because her baby cried, and a mother's instinct to keep moving outlasts pain. But now, her strength was gone. She curled in a dip between rocks, shielding her child from the wind. Her breath came in shallow puffs. Her heartbeat slowed. She closed her eyes and held the child tighter, whispering with cracked lips, "Just sleep, little star. Mama's got you." Snow buried her. Time passed. She didn't know how long. There was no sky, no sound, just the numb weight of her own body. Until something shifted. Warmth. A hand. Firm, calloused fingers brushed snow from her face. A deep voice, raw with disbelief, muttered, "By the stars, you're still breathing." She stirred, barely. Her eyes fluttered open, heavy like stone. A man's face hovered above her, bearded, wrapped in weather-scarred gear, eyes scanning her with urgency. He was real. Or maybe she'd already died. He yanked off his coat and threw it over them both. His arms were strong, lifting her without effort, shifting her into the shelter of his chest. The heat of him felt blinding, foreign. She gasped, and so did the baby, startled back into a weak whimper. He looked down, stunned. "You've got a kid." Cradling them both, he turned and trudged through the storm, heading toward a barely visible slope in the distance. Each step was a fight, his boots sinking deep into snow. He muttered low encouragement, mostly to himself, partly to her. "Hang on. Just hang on." Almost there. The cave was small, dark, but out of the wind. He laid them down gently, layering gear over their shivering bodies. From his pack, he pulled a heat cell and ignited a low flame. It cast flickering shadows on the rock. The baby cried louder now, a sound so alive it felt like a miracle. She blinked at the flickering light. Her voice rasped, barely audible. "Who are you?" He knelt beside her, feeding a thermal packet into her hand. "Call me Kale. I was tracking distress signals. Caught the faintest trace of one from orbit. Wasn't even sure it was real." She nodded faintly. "My ship crashed. Weeks ago." He looked at her like he didn't quite believe she was real either. "You weren't meant to survive that storm." She gave a thin smile. "Didn't plan on it." Kale stared at her a long moment, then leaned forward, studying the baby. "What's the little one's name?" She hesitated, lips trembling. "Nova." He touched the baby's head with surprising gentleness. "Tough name. For a tough kid." For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she let herself breathe. Kale worked with swift efficiency. He rigged up heat barriers from his supplies, shared nutrient paste, even dried socks. His quiet competence was comforting. But more than that, there was something behind his eyes. Something haunted. He didn't talk much, but she could feel it, the weight he carried. They sat close, too cold not to, with Nova between them. The fire cracked softly. Outside, the wind screamed like a predator denied its prey. She looked at him. "You live out here?" "No. I used to scout the rim. Quit after the war. Been wandering since. Thought I'd found peace in silence." He glanced at her. Turns out silence can be a kind of death too. The way he said it made her throat tighten. He didn't ask her name. Didn't ask about her past. He didn't need to. They were both survivors, bound by something older than words. As the fire dimmed and sleep finally pulled at her, she felt something shift inside. Not hope. Not yet. But something close. The storm outside kept howling. But for now, in this pocket of warmth and chance, she was still alive. And so was Nova. And maybe, just maybe, the man who saved her wasn't done surviving either. The wind outside had lessened by morning, but the cold still crept in like a shadow that never left. Cale stirred first, rising stiffly from the cave floor where he'd sat all night, half asleep with a thermal blanket over the woman and her baby. She hadn't woken much. Just fitful dreams and soft murmurs. Nova had cried once, then slept, nestled between them like a fragile ember. He stepped outside the cave, pulling his coat tighter, and scanned the landscape. Nothing but ice-blasted rock and broken white silence. He touched the comm scanner on his wrist. Still no signal. Inside, the woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion flickering before memory settled in. She turned to the fire's low glow, to her child, and finally to the silhouette of the man crouching at the cave's edge. Cale turned toward her. "We're lucky the storm's breaking. But we're not out of it yet." She sat up slowly, pain etched into her every movement. "How far?" "Maybe 20 clicks south. There's an old mining station. I don't know if it's manned, but it's got solar panels. Shelter. A chance." She nodded. "We walk." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure you can?" "I have to." There was no argument after that. Cale helped her up. Rigged a sling from part of his gear to carry Nova against her chest. Wrapped their feet with thermal strips and padded cloth. The woman didn't complain once, though her steps were shaky. Determined. Silent. They moved like ghosts over the snow, sticking to ridge lines where the wind wasn't as cruel. Cale kept checking the sky. Something about the quiet unsettled him. The last time it got this quiet was before the avalanche that buried his squad back on Tregan's moon. Hours passed. Her breathing grew harsh, and he offered her water, part of his last ration. She hesitated, then took a small sip, giving the rest to Nova. Cale watched her with a kind of respect that went beyond admiration. It was something elemental. As night began to crawl across the ice again, the shadows growing longer, a sound broke the silence. Engines. Far off, almost distant enough to be imagination. But Cale's instincts kicked in. He pulled her down behind a snowbank. "What is it?" she whispered. "Hunters. Or raiders. Maybe just scavengers, but nothing good travels this wasteland by choice." They crouched in silence, watching the skimmer crest the ridge. A rusted machine, barely held together by wire and will, slithered over the snow like a steel serpent. On its back, 2 figures. Armed. Not in uniform. Not rescue. Cale's jaw tightened. "Stay here." He moved fast, low, silent like a veteran ghost. The woman's heart thundered in her chest as she watched him vanish behind rocks. The baby whimpered, and she pressed Nova closer. Then came the crash of movement. A sharp shout. A flash of energy. One figure dropped from the skimmer. The other turned, confused, just in time for Cale to appear from behind and take him down with brutal efficiency. She rose, panicked, unsure what she'd see, but it was over in seconds. The skimmer now silent. The raiders not moving. Cale stood over them, chest heaving. Blood on his gloves. Not his. He looked back at her. They weren't alone. "We need to move." She didn't ask what happened. She just followed. The skimmer still worked. Barely. Cale adjusted the controls and got them moving south, faster now. The landscape blurred by, frost clinging to the cracked windshield. She sat behind him, Nova asleep in her arms again. "You've done this before." He didn't turn. "Too many times." "What happened to you?" Cale was quiet. "Then, the war happened. I was good at it. Too good. Left me with nothing to protect. Until today." She looked down at her daughter. "You didn't have to come for us." "I know." They reached the mining station just as night truly fell. It looked abandoned, snow choking the entrance. But the solar panel above flickered with a faint light. Cale cleared the doorway, shouldered it open. Inside, dark, cold, but standing. He set up camp fast. Restored emergency power. Heat sputtered from an old vent in the corner. She laid Nova down and sat beside her, staring at the man across the room. "You saved us twice today." "I had help." "From who?" He glanced at her. From you. You didn't quit. She gave a faint laugh. I thought I did. Out there, I gave up. I was ready to die. But you didn't. The heater rumbled to life. The air warmed slowly, the first real warmth she'd felt in weeks. She didn't know what came next. Didn't know if this station had a working comm, if someone would find them. If they'd survive another week. But Kale was here. And she wasn't alone anymore. The heater pulsed weak warmth into the corners of the station, rattling like it might give up at any second. The old mining shelter had power, barely, but it was enough to thaw the cold out of their bones. For now. Nova slept soundly, tucked into layers of thermal cloth. The woman, her name still not spoken aloud, sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, watching the shadows stretch across the ceiling. Kale stood by the console, trying to coax the emergency comm system to life. No signal. He slammed a fist lightly on the panel and turned away, frustrated. It's shorted. Snow damage. And the solar arrays not feeding clean power. She glanced at him. So we're stuck. For now. Outside, the silence had returned, but it wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. Kale kept checking the window. Something about the raiders gnawed at him. They weren't out there by accident. Too far from known smuggler routes. Too close to where he picked up her faint distress signal. He didn't tell her that yet. You've been quiet, she said softly. More than usual. He rubbed the back of his neck. I think someone was tracking your crash. Not just scavengers. Someone looking for survivors. Her breath caught. You think they were after Nova? I don't know. But I know one thing. They weren't surprised to find us. She leaned back, pulling Nova closer protectively. I thought we escaped them when we left the colonies. Kale's eyes locked on hers. You ran from something? I ran from *them*. She hesitated. There's a faction out there, genetic purists. They consider children like Nova, like me, corruptions. I didn't even know I was a carrier until after she was born. They marked us for cleansing. We fled. The crash wasn't sabotage, but it wasn't just bad luck either. Kale's expression hardened. They're still hunting you. Always. He paced for a moment, deep in thought. Then stopped. We can't stay here. If they were on your trail, they'll follow the skimmer's tracks. They're probably already out there, sweeping the snow. Where do we go? He turned slowly to the far wall. There's an old signal array on the mountain's spine. Abandoned, but it's got a direct uplink to orbital relays. If I can patch in, I can call down real help. Her eyes widened. How far? 14 clicks. Uphill. Through night ice. She stared at him. Then nodded. Let's go. You and Nova stay here. I go alone. I move faster. She stood, jaw clenched. I won't wait behind again. You'll slow me down. I'll die trying, then. But I won't sit here while you vanish like everyone else did. Kale didn't argue. He saw it in her face, the kind of stubborn that came from loss so deep, it turned into steel. They left before full dark. Wrapped in every scrap of warmth they could carry, Nova held tight against her chest, they stepped into the biting wind. Kale led the way with a quiet intensity, watching every ridge and hollow for movement. The higher they climbed, the thinner the air grew, and the colder the wind sliced. Nova stirred, soft whimpers muffled by cloth. The woman hummed gently, a tune from somewhere far away, lost to time but etched into her memory. Kale glanced back, and for a moment, something flickered behind his worn, guarded eyes. Halfway up the slope, the sky flashed. A flare. Green. They're here, Kale growled. The woman spun, shielding Nova. Kale scanned the ridge. Movement, 3 dark shapes, fanning out, rifles slung low. No more hiding, he muttered. He turned, dragging them behind a boulder. You keep moving. Stick to the left ridge. I'll draw them off. She grabbed his arm. You won't make it back. He looked at her, calm. Doesn't matter. You have to get to that array. No, her voice cracked. You don't get to die for us. He leaned close, his breath ghosting in the cold. I don't plan on dying. But if I don't make it, promise me she does. Tears burned in her eyes. She nodded. Kale turned and vanished into the dark. Gunfire cracked across the snow. Shouts. The sound of plasma rifles slicing the cold air. She ran, boots slipping, lungs burning, gripping Nova so tight the baby stirred but didn't cry. The ridge felt endless. But finally, she saw it, metal struts, a broken antenna jutting into the night sky. The old comm array. She stumbled inside, slamming the hatch behind her. Lights flickered weakly. Consoles hummed. One terminal still glowed. She laid Nova gently down and turned to the screen, trembling fingers flying over controls she barely remembered how to use. Sparks. Static. Then, connection. This is Civilian Survivor Unit 4-7B Emergency Distress Call. Lifeform count, 2. Repeat, 2. Hostile pursuit. Coordinates enclosed. Please respond. Static. Then, signal received. Evac en route. ETA, 21 minutes. Hold position. She collapsed beside Nova, sobbing with relief. But the hatch behind her rattled. Footsteps. She turned, ready to defend her daughter with her bare hands if needed. The hatch creaked open. And Kale stepped through. Bleeding. Exhausted. But alive. You didn't run, he said hoarsely. I promised. He smiled, barely. Good. Because they're not done yet. She helped him to the floor, wrapping his side. They sat in silence as the building trembled from distant gunfire. Nova stirred, then slept again. Above them, the sound of engines pierced the sky. Evac was coming. If they could hold out a few more minutes. The minutes stretched like lifetimes. Outside, the storm roared again, not from weather this time, but from the fury of engines and the burn of plasma fire. Explosions echoed through the ice valley. Kale leaned against the wall, clutching his side, blood seeping through the wrap she'd fastened. But his eyes never left the hatch. Stay with me, she whispered. Just a little longer. He nodded, barely. If I die, you name a star after her. After Nova. You're not dying, she said firmly. A blast rattled the building. Dust rained from the ceiling. Then a sudden, unnatural silence. The kind of quiet that makes you hold your breath. Then, thunder from above. The sharp screech of retrothrusters splitting the sky. A voice crackled through the console speaker. Evac drop confirmed. Touchdown in 30 seconds. Hold your beacon. She ran to the console and triggered the flare beacon. Bright red lit up the mountain. A skirmish broke out just outside, the sounds of boots, shouting, another shot fired. Then, silence again. Moments later, the hatch flung open. A squad of armored responders flooded in, weapons drawn, scanning. One saw Kale and rushed to his side. Another approached her gently, checking the baby's vitals. Clear, someone called. She dropped to her knees, clutching Nova as warmth, not from machines, but from hope, flooded her for the first time. They were safe. The med bay on the evac ship was too white, too clean. But she didn't mind. Nova was sleeping peacefully in a warm cot, monitored by a soft-toned droid. Kale lay nearby, patched up and recovering under a medical field. They hadn't spoken since liftoff. Now, as the stars stretched outside the viewport, she sat beside him, holding his hand. You didn't have to come back, she whispered. He opened one eye. You didn't run. I wasn't going to leave you behind. Tears burned her eyes again. She squeezed his fingers. I didn't even know your name until 2 nights ago. And you saved our lives. You saved mine too, he replied. I just forgot what it felt like to be alive. She looked down at Nova. I want her to grow up in a world that doesn't hunt her for being born. You're going to give her that. I can feel it. She looked at him. Come with us. He blinked, surprised. You don't even know me. I know enough. He smiled faintly. Then yeah. I think I'd like that. Months later, on a small green colony far from the scars of war, a girl with deep blue eyes took her first unassisted steps in the grass. Her mother sat under a tree, watching with tears in her eyes. Beside her, Kale carved wood quietly, a soft smile on his face. Nova giggled as she fell into the flowers. They had made it. Not because they were strong. Not because they were lucky, but because they refused to give up. Moral ***. Sometimes survival isn't about strength or skill, it's about love, and the stubborn refusal to let go of the people who matter. Even in the coldest, darkest places, one spark of humanity can be enough to change everything. Even a soldier with nothing left to live for can find something worth saving.